and to do a little ledge underneath, I think.
So we have to open the public hearing.
Yep, no motion. Yep.
So welcome to the Board of Selectmen's second public hearing for the town ordinances. I would entertain a motion to open our public hearing.
So moved at 6:30.
I second.
John DeSantis.
Yes.
Stan Tutman.
Yes.
Steve Robinson.
Yes.
Mary Ann Hawks.
Yes.
Lisa Elby.
Yes.
With a vote 5-0, you've opened the public hearing for the annual town meeting warrant at 6:30 PM.
So this year, our warrant is 22 articles long for the town portion of the warrant. And we'll go through each of those articles here this evening, open to anybody asking questions. The first two articles are just the election and town meeting notice. The actual town meeting will be on Tuesday, June 10th, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. In our town hall. So on June 10th, so that will be that. Choosing the moderator and things at Article 1 and Article 2. So we'll begin with the legislative articles. The legislative articles, we have 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 of them. And
Hold on.
we have,
Can I just mention for those who are on by Zoom, if you have a question, if you can just raise your hand, we will call out your name and answer your question you have after an article is read.
thank you. And I welcome Mr. Greenwood here this evening.
Yes.
Thank you for the
I'm not
support.
sure, I'm coming in a little blind, but I guess I'm.
Yeah,
Yes.
what we found by the first one was that a little bit of English explanation to what the article actually is covering is always a good thing. So we'll refer to you to help us with that
Okay.
in doing. So again, so I'll start with Article 3. Shall an ordinance titled Poland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Sections 1100, short title, and 1103, other codes adopted in conjunction with building code standards for the town of Poland, and adoption of the NFPA 1 fire code reference, and 1205 adoption of the NFPA Life Safety 101 by reference be amended. So this is something that the planning board has brought forward. I think that this article is just to bring us up to state statute.
Right, just up to what the current state requires, the state statute is using.
Anybody, any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to Article 4. Article 4 is an ordinance titled Poland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 506.2.k.3, General Purpose 1, permitted commercial, industrial, institutional, governmental, and other uses requiring site plan review be amended.
I've got a question, because I'm not sure which one of these refers to the actual building codes. That I know somewhere in one of these, it updates the codes from like 2022 to 2024 or something like that, whatever it is. I just saw in the news that there's some new building codes. One of them I know was with insulation. I'm not sure what else was involved in that building code. Is the code that we're gonna be amending now, this new one that just came out, or is it last year's?
I believe it's well, it'd have to be last year's, I guess, because if it just came out recently, what are you saying, how recent is it since?
Well, there was just something on the news, so I'm not sure exactly when it passed. I have no idea.
According to what Scott tells me, because we don't see the real details of what's being changed, it's just that we're upgrading to what the wording that comes down from the state, that, or if any changes have taken place at this, in the new code, like the plumbing code example, and I asked him just specifically for that, because I said, we don't really see or know what is being changed in this code, other than the fact that we're using their standard, and so one of the things in the plumbing code, which he gave as an example, was that as far as septic systems, that they now require risers on septic tanks, which, if you're not familiar with what a riser is, but it allows people to access the tank during the winter months especially, but without having to dig. So it's just, that type of thing.
Okay. I know some of the codes will refer to like the 2024 version of whatever the particular code is.
Right.
And that's what I was wondering, like within the building codes, if you knew what year they were gonna update it to.
Oh, so from what I understand with the building codes is there's not gonna be a year in it anymore, because it always has to be current with whatever the state is.
Oh, okay.
So it's just gonna say to the state's building code, that way they never have to go, each year they don't have to change it anymore
Okay.
going forward. It just says to the state, the current state code.
Then that answers that question. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm half listening, half looking at the Zoom behind me on my
That's fine.
phone.
Oh,
And
that
they're
is-
currently using those now, I believe, even
Yes.
before it's adopted.
Okay.
In this particular article, it looks like the only change they made was regarding permitted commercial, industrial, institutional, governmental, and other uses requiring a site plan review. They added transient campgrounds, and that was the only change.
Right. And that was, I think, a request from a property owner that wanted to be able to use his land for that. And so that was something that we adopted and took command as something that, we'd have to review it still, but it would be something that would be an allowed use in certain zones. So,
It looks like this, the words was general purpose one.
correct, right.
So, this is the zone, so. Okay, any questions on this one? Article 5, shall the ordinance titled Poland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 506.2.A.1, Village 1, Village 2, Village 3, and Village 4 be amended? This one, I guess, has to do with permitted uses requiring a permit for the code enforcement for housing, manufacturing.
Right, I believe that, and I don't have a copy of what you're all referring to, but I think that is because the state came out this past year, if you perhaps remember, is that mobile homes are allowed everywhere now. You cannot have a zoned area that you do not allow mobile homes. And I believe that was why that had to be changed.
And I do remember that from, and I remember that from last week. So basically, we're adopting it into every one of our different zones that we have
Yes.
within the town.
Correct.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, on that mobile, that's newer mobile homes, correct?
Well, I guess that would be, I'm not sure as far as say new mobile homes, but I believe they have to be within a certain, within 10 years in order to be financed. So it would be somebody bringing one in, perhaps, but it would, at this point, we do not have anyone in a zone other than what's allowed, because we have like a overlay area for mobile homes. But now it's just saying, moving forward, that it would be allowed, and I don't know that it specifically says it has to be a new home, but it would be allowed in all zones. And that's a state requirement. We're just following what the state is requiring.
Yeah, finance 10 years, that makes sense. As banks require that.
Right, that would be,
Thanks.
mhm.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Article number 6, shall the ordinance titled Poland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 508.18.I.3, permanent sign types and standards permitted for downtown village 1, 2, 3, 4, and general purpose 1, 2, and 3 zoning districts be amended. And I think this was just dealing with the types of signs allowed.
I think
Right.
Scott said that it had to do with making sure that the sign was the same throughout all zones, right?
No, this one deals with us forgetting to put historic zoning districts in there. We left off the historic zoning district when we wrote this article a long time ago, so this was just adding in the word historic zoning district.
To include all
To
the
include.
zones, yeah, so
Yep.
it's more of just a correcting a omission.
Okay, any questions, comments? Article 7, shall the ordinance titled Portland Comprehensive Land Use Code 508.18.I.3.I sign area and 508.18.I.3.K changeable signs be amended? So I think this had to do with that there only can be, what's that?
The square footage.
The square
limited
footage.
to 16.
What can be lit?
What can be lit
Right.
at any, at any moment, right?
Correct. I think it was always the same amount, it's just that you were allowed to have a larger sign, but you could only use a piece of it, as far as the changeable part. So now it's saying that, basically, I think they're changing the size still of the sign, but it's still the same, changeable part is still the same.
Any questions? Hearing none, Article 8, shall the ordinance titled Portland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 109.2, public hearing be amended?
Obviously ensuring that we give notice to
Yeah.
abutters regarding a zoning change.
Yep, so this is to make sure that we actually are forced to contact abutters to any zone changes or whatever. I know that last year we had a circumstance where some people, we couldn't prove that we'd sent them one, and they obviously didn't think they'd gotten one, and this kind of hopefully tightens that up,
Right.
so that people get the notifications.
I believe so, and I think, because it's typically just a postcard now, I believe that goes out, so, yeah. But, yeah, abutters should have something, make sure that they are aware of something like that, no question.
Any questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, Article 9, shall the ordinance entitled Portland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 506.2, Land Use Key 508.6, accessory dwelling units and off-site accessory structures, 508.7.B.3, multifamily dwellings, and 508.27.A, land uses in the shoreland area, 508.27.A, notes, 508.27.B, principal and accessory structures, and Chapter 14, definitions be amended.
And what this is this is getting rid of the town of Poland's accessory apartment and accessory residential structure and moving it all to accessory dwelling unit, which is what the state goes by with the state rules to what that means. So we're just getting rid of our language and adopting the state language for what they consider it.
Any questions? Hearing none. Article 10, shall the ordinance titled Portland Comprehensive Land Use Code, Section 16.2B, Administration, 1602E, Administration, 1602E.3, Administration, and Chapter 14, definitions be amended? I think this has to do with changing the large-scale solar to being a maximum of 4 acres.
Right, we just, well, I'm trying to think exactly how we ended up with it. We just said they would not be a large-scale solar farm. And the concern was brought up about that was the fact that it's really destroying a lot of the farmland, the views of the beautiful farmland we have. And also, after seeing like what takes place down in Gray, I mean, it's those beautiful fields there, and now it's, it's all solar farms. And we're just saying that we really want that for our community. So it's a thing where the farmland is, I understand the farmers want to get some value out of their land, but that's something that it's certainly changing what I think in the comprehensive land use codes, we want to keep Poland looking rural and not, with solar panels. I mean, we're not saying we're against solar panels. Like, we had a solar farm that, and I don't think they've still actually started it yet, but over on Lewiston Junction Road. And we approved that one, and it's back, it's not even able to see it from the road. It's off the road, and it's in an area that's not, it's kind of a wetland area, but they can still do a solar farm there. And And so the land is usable, but it's just not in view. And so that was one of the concerns, that they're popping up so fast everywhere, and that it's really changing the, scope of properties,
Now, is there an appeal process that if somebody wants to put in something larger than 4 acres, that they can appeal?
I suppose so. We just said we would not have large solar farms, but it would not be an article there. But certainly, I think someone could. It would still have to go through the same review process that we put, them through. And so, and the land would have to be something that's, would fall into under the requirements that we have for solar farms. So, and one of the things that we've also looked at is that if they are along a main road, that there's some type of screening that takes place too, that just to sort of, I guess, help the scene a little bit. But if you're familiar with, like in Mechanic Falls now on the Lewiston Road, they're putting in solar farms over there, and it's, I don't know, it's just kind of a intrusion, I think, in myself anyway, but.
Okay, but do you know for sure that there is an appeals process if somebody wants to?
Stan, if this is what the land use code says, then there's no appeal. It's
Okay,
4 acres.
That's what I'm asking, so there's no appeal then?
No.
Okay.
Can I speak as a resident and not as my town position? Thank you. I have a problem with this one, and the only reason I have a problem with it is because I don't think we should be saying someone can only use up to 4 acres for a solar farm. If they have 50 acres of land and they want to use 10 acres, I really feel like they should be allowed to use that 10 acres. I feel instead of us limiting the acreage, I think we should need to look at what do we do and put in place for buffers and stuff between those. So for me, I would like to see this be brought back to the planning board for maybe another year, next year or something, or a special town meeting where we can talk about buffers maybe instead of the acreage amount. Again, that's me as a resident of Poland and not in a town position.
I agree with that.
One of the things, though, too, that was brought up when we discussed that was the fact that even for a 4-acre solar farm, especially if you were putting it into a wooded area, it would be necessary to clear 10 acres
Right.
to just give you the solar rays you need for that 4-acre farm. So that's, we've noticed where some other towns have started to slow the solar farms down, and so that was part of why we also had this discussion, and we had a couple of different scenarios, I mean, saying, the size and everything, but that I guess we just came down to the fact, we said, let's not do large ones and just do the small and medium ones. So that was why, but I agree with you on the buffering part. I think there has to be some screening of some, part, and especially I wouldn't want to see it on 26 here, I mean, it just wouldn't be appropriate, I don't think, for what we're trying to develop as a, invitation to our community.
Other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll now move on to the municipal articles. First municipal article,
Thank you.
Thank
George,
you.
thank you for coming in.
Okay, all right, now
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Hopefully it was helpful a little bit.
It was,
Very
thanks.
much so.
Appreciate it.
to see if the town
You too.
will vote to make all
Give her that
tax
with you.
assessed for the towns for 2026 fiscal year, July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026, due to 2 installments. The first half, total assessed will be made payable on October 1st, 2025, the remaining half on April 1st, 2026, and to charge an interest rate of 7.5% per year, computed on the daily basis, and the portion of the installment that remains outstanding as of November 1st and May 1st. This is pretty much of a standard thing. It goes on to say that the pursuant to the thing, to set the interest rate to be paid by the town on abated taxes at 3%, and to see if the town will permit the tax collector or designee to waive accidental tax interest payment shortages in the amount not to exceed $5. Any questions or comments? Pretty much had to have this every year to set forth that. Moving on to Article 12, to see if the town will vote to appropriate $3,213,575 in revenue from non-property tax resources to reduce the amount of taxation authorized to be raised by taxation, and further see if the town will authorize the Board of Select Persons and Treasurer to accept any additional revenues or funds that may be used to reduce the amount required to be raised by taxation. So this basically is all of our revenue articles, to include solid waste, to include motor vehicle excise taxes, to include fire rescue, rescue specifically, things and the like. So, any questions? Hearing on Article 13, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $1,675,000 for general government. So general government is everything to do with the front office. It has to do with debt service, legal and audit assessing fees, and all other things, buildings and grounds, cable TV. Hearing nothing, move on to Article 14, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $756,029 for community services. Community services is our planning and development group, recreational salaries and benefits. So again, that's just the salaries and benefits of the people, Scott and person to do. Everything else of the recreation department and all of their events are self-funded. Health officer, beach maintenance, conservation services, general assistance, social service agencies, library, and ball field maintenance. Any questions? Hearing none,
Nope, there's a hand up.
on to.
Hold on.
Steve, there's a
sorry?
hand up.
Sherry has a hand up.
Great,
Can you unmute her?
hi Sherry, go ahead.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So could you tell me if there's a raise built into that for the rec director?
Yes.
Yes, there is. There's a 3.5% cost of living adjustment built into that for the rec director, and I think he's maxed out on credit for experience.
Is maxed out for what? I'm sorry.
Credit for experience. People will get a credit for experience up to 20 years of service, and it's capped at 20.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Sherry, your hand's still up. Did you have another question? Nope. Okay.
All right, Article 15, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $971,330 for public works and $521,533 for solid waste. So again, this is pretty much to run and operate public works and solid waste. I do know that solid waste is seeing, and I can't recall off the top of my head what the percent increase is for the solid waste budget line here.
Solid waste is going up 21.7%, and that is mainly due to our pull fees that we have to pay doubled going to MWAC and to Casella.
Any questions? Comments? Hearing none, move on to Article 16, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $2,246,478 for public safety. So, of course, this is our fire rescue, our law enforcement contract, our dispatching contracts, animal control contract, street lights, and emergency management. Any questions or comments? Yes, Sherry.
So I know I read in the flyer that came out in the mail that it's for, it covers some union and some non-union members of the fire department. Is this the correct article?
Yes, it would be.
Raise increases. So could you kind of explain the
Sure.
difference between the union and the non-union and the
We have a,
salary increases?
we have a union in the fire department, the local International Association of Firefighters, Local 5232. They comprise, it's 8 full-time personnel. The other full-time personnel are non-union personnel. And, pardon me, that also includes per diem firefighters as well.
Wait,
So the union would dictate the salaries for the union members,
yes.
and then the town would appropriate for the non-union members?
All the money in there will go to all employees of the fire rescue department. The salaries for union are determined by a collective bargaining agreement that we signed a few years ago. The salaries for non-union and per diem personnel are determined by the administrative staff here in town and that are consistent with our wage scale.
Okay, and is that 3.5% as well?
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Not, move on to Article 17, to see if the town will appropriate for tax increment financing districts an estimated total amount of $981,500, depending upon the actual mill rate. So this is Article 17 is the TIF 1 is $370,000, TIF 2 is $575,000, and downtown TIF is $36,500. So these are expenses that we use out of those TIF districts to support the water and sewer project. Out of TIF 2, I think, is where that comes out of. And I know that there's some salaries that are paid for in percent portion of TIF. There's some street lights, I think, in there
Yeah,
too,
the
right?
biggest expense out of all that is debt service
Yeah.
in all 3 of those TIF expenses. And you said there's some street lights. There's a very small portion of salaries that's able to be credited against TIF expenses. And I think that there might be a couple other ones, but they're fairly small dollar level expenses.
Any questions or comments? Now, moving on to Article 18, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $1,313,060 for the FY26 capital improvement program for capital reserve accounts. So this is the one that we have a municipal facilities reserve that we're going to put in $25,000, technology reserve of $16,000. The big ticket item is the paving roads reserve, and all the work that we do for the paving is $758,060. Public Works vehicle reserve will be $150. Fire rescue reserve is $240. Contingency of $50,000 for anything unplanned. The reevaluation reserve is $70,000. We're trying to build that up for the reevaluation that we've scheduled in a couple of years. Code enforcement reserve is $3,000 and conservation is $1,000. Any questions? Hearing none, moving on to Article 19, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $20,000 based upon the mill rate for overlay purposes of granting tax abatements and addressing other tax errors. Again, pretty much an article that we have every year, and pretty much this amount of money in it every year, so. Any questions? Hearing none, move on to Article 20, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Select Persons to transfer from the town's unassigned fund balance an amount of $30,000 for the purpose of funding property tax assistance ordinance in the amount not to exceed $388,666 for the purpose of reducing the total amount authorized to be raised by taxation for fiscal year 2026. So this is where we take the money that we did not spend last year, or that we had also in combination raised higher on the non-taxation revenue lines, to whatever's been left over. We don't need more money to be put into our general coffers. We have more than enough percent to sustain that. So we've instituted and done this for the last 3 years at least, of taking that exact amount, putting it back on the next year's article to roll back to taxation and reduces the taxes before we set the mill rate. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, and I'm sorry, and by the way, I wanted to explain, the $30,000 is a property tax assistance that we have that needs replenishment to help out a lot of our seniors in the community, and the criterias of accepting that. No questions, we'll move on to Article 21, to see if the town will vote and raise and appropriate $1,425,000 for county taxes. This is an increase of about 10% again, right?
10.6.
10.6% year on year from the county. Thank you very much.
10.61.
Any questions or comments?
That's something we have no control over. They send us a bill and we have to pay it.
Yep. All right, Article 22, to see if the town will vote and authorize the Board of Select Persons to transfer into the town's special revenue account $563,294 for the purpose of reducing the total amount authorized to be raised by taxation for fiscal year 2026. This amount represents the extra collected taxes based upon the RSU 16 tax assessment that we had in FY 2025 commitment versus the lower amount the townspeople approved at a later date of the RSU 16 budget. So it's something that all three communities in RSU 16 are doing, is that the money that we had to set the mill rate before the final adoption of the RSU bill was established, that additional money that we have raised that totaled the $563,294 is now going to be reverted back, and again, reduce taxation for everybody before setting the mill rate. Just, it's something that we've collected, kept separate, knew the exact amount, and are rolling it back to the taxpayers. Any questions or comments? If not, that is our 22 articles for our town meeting on June 10th. Any other further questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make the motion at 7:03 to close the public hearing.
Second?
John DeSantis.
Yes.
Stan Tettenman.
Yes.
Steve Robinson.
Yes.
Marion Hawks.
Yes.
Lisa Elby.
Yes.
With a vote 5-0, you have closed the public hearing at 7:03 PM. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Wednesday.
It's good to have some people.